Welcome to the Theory of DFS podcast. I'm Jordan Cooper, the co-author of the Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports. It's a 15-hour audio DFS masterclass you can pick up at theoryofdfs.com. Drawing with me, as usual, Neil Orfield, Player Q, DFS, from Awesomeo, from the High Stakes DFS podcast. And if you notice that I'm sprinkling in guests every so often, maybe not every other week, that you're on every other week type of thing, but enough so that people, and it's not, Neil, it's not because of the YouTube comments that you're boring.
That's all right. I don't take it personally. There's just one guy really who was really adamant that I'm boring, and I got no problem with that. You can think I'm boring. I'm kind of boring. That's fair.
Most
But
people think that I talk too much, and they want other people to talk more. And this guy is like, no, but and maybe that's true, but anyone but Neil.
Exactly. Just I want to hear from somebody other than Neil. Yeah. I mean, whatever. It is what it is. But yeah, I watched your podcast with Sarah Mack yesterday. Actually, I finished it yesterday. Most of it was about soccer, so I was like most of the time I was like I don't really know what you're talking about, but some of the more general principles I still was entertained by it. Still felt like it was informative. So yeah, it was fun. I enjoy seeing you have other guests because before I became a regular guest on this podcast, it was one of my go-to podcasts every week. So it's good to hear from other people sometimes too.
Right. Sometimes the episodes are more for me or more for a more niche audience. Like if you're an OG DFS soccer player, like Sarah, that's the episode, right? I had Ryan Belangi on, I had Pew 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 on, like guys that are more like they specialize just in that sport. And
Yep.
if you've been on DraftKings since they offered DFS soccer, these are the people that like they're still in the lobby, they're still on top, and you knew them
These are all
7 years ago.
I know the names. Like I've heard these usernames. I'm kind of familiar with them, but I don't know why I know them. So like I was familiar with the name Sarah Mac, Pew Pew Pew, Ryan Belangi. I'm like, how do I know that name? And apparently they're all great DFS players, just not in the sports that I play.
Right, and I mean every niche sport kind of has that. Like I know some PGA people that just like if you play golf, you know that they're very good, but it's like
Yep.
the general. If you play just NFL or NBA or MLB, you're like you would go into the lobby and go, oh, I want to take these guys' games. I've never seen them before, and it's like no. And also inside of soccer, there is that also because there's so many leagues in soccer. It's not just soccer. Like it's the only sport in the lobby where like there's 20 different soccer leagues. So like you could know a lot about the Premier League in England, and then there'll be a Bundesliga slate, and it's like, well, do you know Germans? Do you know the German teams? Right.
Right.
Well,
I mean, doesn't that matter if you're using the same kind of stuff that Saramek is using, like using simulations? Do you need to know the players? I guess maybe you do to be able to simulate well to some extent. But I mean, I would assume based on that conversation, I got the impression that at least any type of soccer, assuming that it's all the same scoring, same format, he could probably cover that with any different soccer league.
well, you
But most
can,
people, most people obviously can't do what he does either.
yeah, but also that the way that you would put in projections would be different because leagues and teams play so much differently in soccer than in a sport like football. Like even in football, we would consider like, oh, they're the Seahawks. The play calling is different or whatever, but it's still the same sport. But in soccer, there's a lot of like just in general, like if you're a soccer DFS player, the league that you actually prefer to play like if they offered the bigger contest for it would be Bundesliga. Like German soccer is just more entertaining. The teams play in a much more DFS friendly style. The totals are higher, so it's like you would like to play that league, and then you have a league like the French league, who the scores tend to be lower. They're like other than like PSG, like they're a lot. A lot of the games are the totals are 2 to 2.5, so there's less goals. Then if you play Champions League, which is the top teams in all of Europe playing together on the weekdays, like those totals could be 3.5 type of games.
So
And
where would you say a good soccer DFS player has the bigger edge? In the German league where there's a lot of scoring, or in the French league where there's no scoring? Because I would think it's more projectable the more scoring there is, but also no, you don't think
no,
so?
because that's the most that goals are similar like home runs in baseball. So like the most projectable like leagues, like for instance, like like La Liga. La Liga is less project like the amount of it depends on the amount of peripheral points in relation to the total scoring because it's much easier to project crosses, much easier to project shots, much easier to
Okay.
project chances like tackles won is kind of variant and fouls drawn is a little bit variant, but they're these little points being scored. It's like you have a lot more
Okay.
data points on that
That
than
makes
pure
sense.
goals and assists.
I didn't
So
realize that there were all those different types of scoring as well,
right,
in addition to assists and goals, and so okay, that makes
right.
sense.
So like the best to me, the best DFS league, if you're very projection based, would be the Championship in England. So they're second division, and DraftKings does run contests on like days, like on a Monday. There's an 8 game, English Championship slate. I mean, the prize pool is garbage. Uh, in the Championship, these are the 24 teams that are below the Premier League. And typically they play a very English style, which involves a lot of crossing. That's typically the dumb way to play soccer. Like weak teams play that way because when you cross the ball, you're more likely to give up possession. Good
Mm,
teams typically like shorter passing and keeping possession. So that's why we have a team like Man City in the Premier League that they'll score 3 goals, but a lot of times like their players don't rack up that many peripherals because they're not crossing much, right? They're really trying to find the best chances, and they may get 24 chances in the game, but no one on their team is crossing 15 times. Yet the lower league teams, there's you can have fullbacks that cross the ball 18 times in a game, and the guy scores 22 fantasy points without a goal or an assist, and it's so much more easy to project those stats. And then you have
okay.
a league like La Liga, and in Spain, where there's much less crossing, and there's a biological reason for that. Is that Spanish players tend to be shorter, so there aren't as many true target center forwards. Yet if you go in like the English Premier League, all the weaker sides typically have 6'4" forwards that really aren't that skillful with the ball at their feet, but they're just like they're a big guy. They get their head on it. We're gonna cross 24 times and whatever.
Mm,
So those are typically the leagues that you have more edge in, and the
okay.
leagues where there's a lot more goal scoring there isn't. The German league, the Bundesliga, is like a good mix of both. Like teams typically play a much more attacking style, even if they're a lower table team, than in the Premier League, where the lower table teams are just like we're just going to cede 70% possession, put 10 men behind the ball, and our players really aren't going to score. Like we're not bombing up the field or anything. So like even the leagues are different. So you can't just walk in. Yeah, soccer DFS in general is there's you know the nuances of playing is still the same. Just like you play USFL because you played NFL DFS. You could play WNBA if you played NBA. The game really hasn't changed. But
Right.
like in NCAA basketball, like games are lower scoring. So like most of the time you're not going to get players that score 70 fantasy points because it's just that no team is going to score 120 points in the game. The games are shorter and they're less efficient, and the shot clock is different. So it's like the difference in the range of outcomes between players tends to be smaller because there's no like ultimate ceiling result. Someone that scores 36 points in NCAA, that may be the high scorer on the slate, 36, 40 points. From what I know, I don't know. I don't play NCAA. I don't play college basketball, but it's
Right.
very very similar in soccer. So like even in the soccer lobby, like I'm not gonna wake up and be like, well, I haven't followed the French league all year, and then play some slate with 3 French league teams in it and go, I don't even know what the hell's I don't know how these teams even play. Right? I could look at there's not that many good projections in the industry. A lot of times, most people just do projections for Premier League and Champions League. So, like
So
the
you get
more the
slates
more
that
you know, the
go
better.
across leagues. You say with three teams from the whatever league that was. So do you get slates that you have cross leagues, like multiple
Yes,
leagues in the same slate? Okay,
yeah,
interesting.
they're called interleague slates. They do it just for the sake of if there are not enough teams from a league playing on a certain day. A lot of times, leagues play on like everyone plays on Saturdays or something like that. Now, the most
Okay,
popular league is the Premier League in England, so that's the bigger prize pools or whatever. But like Serie A in Italy typically plays like Saturday afternoons our time here. But then what you'll have is because of TV, you'll have a Friday where there's at 2:30 Eastern, at 2 o'clock Eastern, there's a French league game. At 2:30, there's a Premier League game, and at 2:45, there's an Italian league game. Right. So instead of running one a show, they'll run showdown slates also, but they'll call it interleague, and like those 3 games across those 3 leagues, that's one slate, right? Which makes it's very hard to pick up, because if you don't follow like all the leagues, like it's like, oh yeah, okay, I know that these 2 Premier League teams, but I don't know these 2 French league teams.
Right.
And it's like they're all on the same
Yeah,
slate, and that's why it's hard to grow those types of slates. And the prize pools are just like it's $1,000. It's $1,000 prize, not $1,000 to first for the main GPP. It is $1,000 prize pool.
Right. Oh God. Yeah. No thanks. So that's all very interesting. How did your MMA go this? Changing to us, working our way up through sports that I know a little bit about. We'll go from sport I know nothing about to a sport that I've dabbled in, mostly because I know that I'm going to be talking with you about it, and then maybe we'll talk about baseball later. Sports I know,
Did you play the
I saw
MMA?
that you were.
Did you play the UFC slate?
I played, yeah, this Saturday, and you and I, we were, I think, through the first, or through 4 fights of our fighters, you and I were tied. We were 2v2 away at one point, pretty close, doing well, and then you pulled up and you were in front for a little while, and then of course Brian Jester ended up winning that one. But yeah, I saw that you were in front for a while.
If Lemos would have scored 98.5 points in the last fight, I would have won $21,000 with an 8-way split for first, right? But I mean, it was one of those. It was a chaos card, with the fight getting canceled after lock, and the first fight, I don't know why it was even sanctioned for the UFC. The guy fucking fouled out, and the photojournalist won. So, and I had like 3 out of 150 with Mike Jackson in it. So like, it's like, I don't know what that's going to happen. But I was way under on Romanov. It was 54% owned and got a 0. So it's like, okay, my Dean Barry 25-point lineups look pretty good now.
Yep.
No, but I ended up winning. I made $750. So like,
nice.
On
the main slate.
Yeah. Yeah. I typically don't play the TV captain mode slate. I just play the main slate, and I mean my uniques were low. I mean I had like 60 something under 5s and 15 uniques, but I had over 100 under 10s. It was one of those cards that once again I computed, and like it's hard for me to imagine a high probability of a lineup that leaves more than $1,000 on the table to win with multiple. Like I computed a 93% chance that one of the top 3, the $9,300 plus the top 3 fighters, the huge favorites, that 93% chance that at least one would be in the optimal lineup. So once that was the case, it's like once you plugged in 2, there weren't enough combos available. Like once you plugged into 2 of Pedro, Romanov, or Barry, I saw that like there's less than 100 lineups available to even do that without obviously stacking a fight. So I just knew that those lineups would be over 10 dupes like automatically, pretty much. So I just eliminated that and just like I'll play one. Max one of I know at least one, like exactly one.
Exactly one. Yep.
Right. So I just laid one of and so that's why I was under on Romanov, because I would like split like a third each on all of them. And then there was some popular under because of that construction, that 2.9K construction, like Montana De La Rosa was way overowned, right? Jordan Wright was way overowned, so I was just light on those. That's how I made a profit. That I was pretty much under on the losing fighters and over on the winning fighters, but not a first place. If you don't win first place in MMA, you're done. And I mean, and some of these smaller field stuff. Dude, I won 2 $555 tickets with lineups that had Romanov and 2 losses in it.
Wow.
Right? Like with like a 316 or something. Because there are a lot of people that played like played Lando Venata or something, and he lost.
I had a ton of him, yeah.
Right, and a lot of people played Jordan Wright, and he lost. Or Montana De La Rosa, and she lost. And then Lemos and She lost and then had Romanoff with his, and I had a Romanoff 0, but then he also had like Dean Barry with 25. Like, so it's like I
Yeah,
see lineups that's like, yeah, it's only a 7-man contest, but it's like I have a 0 and 2 losses in my lineup and still won tickets and still cashed in I think the 555 I min cashed for 1,000 even with like 3 losers in my lineup.
not bad. Yeah, I saw Justin McMahon, I think, saying the same thing, that he won with 3, I don't know, losing fighters or something. So apparently a pretty common thing this weekend. Yeah, it was. I didn't do great. I tended to be over on the fighters that you wanted to be over on, and under on the fighters that you wanted to be under on. But overall, I didn't have that many lineups that were not duped a million times. So I definitely need to go back to the drawing board. I think I looked at my. I think no dupes. I had like 4 total, 4 unique lineups, and then like 50 under 5. So not my best showing in MMA.
Right, and then and the line and the most popular lineup is the lineup that I was telling people. I was in Brett Appley's Discord. It's like, here's the lineup that you do not make. Like out of like there's only one lineup that you should not, like anything else we could debate, but this is the exact lineup that you should not make. And it was, if you've tried to fit in all 3 favorites, like the 93, all those 3 guys, there's
Yep.
literally one combo. Because based
Wow.
on salary, like unless you're stacking one of those fights,
Right.
in order to spend 9,300, 9,500, 9,600, you had to play Lemos, Montana De La Rosa, and else. Because the fight, and
Huh.
that was 50, and that was exactly 50,000. So you couldn't go up from any of them. And if you went down, you went to the opponents of those 3 fighters. So it's like, well, 418 people did that,
Of
right?
course.
Right. It was the most duped lineup in the contest, and it's like, dude, this is not that complicated of a game. Like, just don't. Like, dude, if this lineup wins, I don't even know what the hell. What's the prize pool up there? Let's just put it in at 300,000, maybe, time divided by 418. Like $700 or something if you win with that lineup. 717. That looks like. If
Wow.
it's 300,000, if all those places combined to 300, like, dude, even if it was like even if it was 400,000, that's still less than $1,000.
Yeah, that's not worth playing that lineup.
Right.
I know that I didn't play that one because I did set a salary cap just $200 below at 49,800, just to be a little bit different, to know that I won't have the 50,000 lineups that are going to be max duped. But yeah, overall not my best showing. I also think that I may have made the same mistake that I made like a month ago, where I'm using ownership caps lately in my process. I'm using, so similar how you do your simulations where you look at the odds of a fighter putting up over 100 points.
Mm.
I've been using, Osimo has the top fighters tool, which does the same thing, gives you the odds that the fighter is going to put up 100 or more points, and then I put those in plus like 10% on each fighter. Give or take. I kind of look at where I'm getting. I think that I must have been too restrictive, because I think that I ended up duping myself like 17 times. That's what apparently I did. I learned this
So
the
you
hard way.
duped yourself?
I think so. I actually haven't gone back and looked at it, but when I was trying to, so I actually made the mistake of, I tried entering lineups right at like the minute before lock, and I think I did, or like seconds before lock. So I did do a set before that. So I had lineups in, like a set of lineups, and
Mm.
then I was trying to replace that set with a better set, and got the message that like 82 of them couldn't change or something like that. So
Mm.
I had no idea what my actual lineups were in retrospect. But then I tried to take those lineups and re-upload them to Fantasy Cruncher so I could see what I had, and it said I had 133 unique lineups. So I don't know. It was. I think that I may have had a bunch of, I guess, 18 dupes. So not
Well,
not not
well,
a
I mean, it's good if you dupe yourself if that's the winning lineup, right?
sure.
Right.
But presumably it would have been my hand built lineup, which I gave no thought to, other than like choosing 6 fighters who were not fighting against each other. That's the only thought that I gave to it. So probably wasn't my best lineup. Um,
So you're using
yeah, I don't
ownership
know.
sum caps?
Uh, Exposure caps for myself.
Oh,
So yes,
exposure
I'm
caps. I
putting
thought
in.
you meant total lineup.
No, yeah, no,
Right.
just by exposure caps for individual fighters. So for each individual fighter, I'm looking at the odds of them getting over 100 points, adding about 10% to each one, just to give myself some semblance of some idea of getting good fighters in there, or getting to greater proportion of better fighters. But then I also I ended up boosting. Uh, worse fighters more, like the lower owned fighters. I would allow it to have more than that, just because I figured they don't, or the cheaper fighters don't need to get to 100 points to be in the best lineup. So I don't know. It's a work in progress. It's not a great process that I have right
Right.
now. I think
You're doing a blunt method, which is fine. I'm doing it's weird that I'm doing a more refined process because I'm changing the project because I'm essentially making my own proprietary projection that incorporates ownership into it already.
right.
So for me, the line like exposures don't matter that much to me because it's like I have a baseline set for 6. So like the baseline on a fighter is 1, right? And I alter it's just a divisor, whatever you want to call it, that allows like that centers all the fight because I have a proprietary like weighting on all the betting lines and the projections and everything like that, and it comes out with like a rating, right? And whatever that number is, all I care is it in relation to other fighters, but I want to have a baseline of what I'm like a center point, and that center point should to me is 1, right? So if someone is rated 1.18, that means they're underowned for their probability of putting 100 plus points. And if they're 0.78, that means they're overowned, right? Like that's kind of like the midpoint. So I depending on if too many of the rate because on a larger card, sometimes you may have fighters that a lot of them are underowned only because there's just so many, there's 30 fighters to choose from. So I have like out of the 30 fighters, I have like 23 fighters that are rated over 1. And it's like, well, so what's the midpoint? It's not 1 anymore. So I just changed the divisor to like, instead of dividing by 20, that rating divided by 28, it's like, well, now by 29. And that kind of moves everyone and now I can see it's like, okay, 1 is kind of the center point. So basically, I'm trying to build lineups that have a total rating over 6. Right? Right, because it's already incorporated. And the lineups that are like 6.48 versus 6.12, like the 6.48 is just a higher leverage lineup, right? In comparison to the probability. I don't know what the standard deviation of those lineups are, but it's like, based on that, I naturally, like Montana De La Rosa I had as the most over-owned fighter. So it's like, if I would adjust, because her rating is so low for her price that if I go 150 and I just go 150, 1 unique, right? Just default, whatever like that, I ended up with 3% of her. Right? So it's like it is what it is. But the problem is that like the Sherman, Jackson, and Ike Villanueva were rated slightly better than her, even with like worse chances of winning. And it was trying to jam in 2 9K fighters, right? 2 9K fighters. So I was getting like 11% Sherman. I was getting 16% Jackson because they're rated well enough that when I start jamming in the 2 other people in that range, like I would always get that like $6,600 guy. That's and I look at those. It's like those aren't the lineups that I want to build because they'll be duplicated either too much or those low fighters have such low probability of scoring 100 plus points, even though they're only 3%, 5%, 7% owned. That's like, do I really want to have 20% of my lineups with one of those fighters? And I said no. So like once I start pairing out and like I don't play 2 of the big favorites and I start grouping these things out, then if I ran it just with 1 unique and no care about diversification, then I would get Chase Sherman 2 lineups out of 150, Mike Jackson 4 lineups, and I would get a little bit more Montana De La Rosa, right, 8% instead of 3%, and then it kind of just all works out. I had a lot of Parsons because it turns out he ended up being more owned than I thought he would be. He was 30% owned. I thought he would be more like 24% owned. But in that mid-range, he was rated just so well that, like, since I was building non-2 big favorite lineups, I needed a lot of mid-range stuff. So I was getting a lot of Felipe Lins and a lot of Preston Parsons because that 7,800 to 82, I got a lot of Grant and Kondoshko, like those types of fighters because they fit into those builds, and they were all underowned to some degree. So basically, in order to get that higher rating in my lineup, it just jammed those type of guys. And then guys like Wright and Venata, who I had overowned, I would get like Right, I think I got like 18% of, and Venata I got like 22% of. And, like, it just automatic, like, I don't have to necessarily worry about even setting exposures, because based on the way the rating is, the only way that I start setting exposure caps is if I look and I go, how many high variance lineups do I want? Because it's basically optimizing for variance, right? On a 15-fight card, I may have some lineups that are like rated, my total rating is 7.56, because it's jamming in the 6 most under-owned fighters into the lineup, but they're all like 12%, 18%. It has no main event. It has it's like, okay, that's probably a unique lineup. And sometimes it spends like 49, it's almost all the salary also on a large card. And it's like I
Probably
can
plus
play
EV long term.
Right, long term it's very plus EV.
lineup.
Right, it's just that it wins once and it doesn't even cash like all the other times.
Right.
So how many of my 150 lineups do I want like this? If I want all 150 of that high, I could just understand that I'm going to have like 60% of some 8% owned fighter that should be 18% owned. And do I, from a risk tolerance perspective, do I want my portfolio to exist of all of those types of lineups when I can find lineups that are still plus EV, not as plus EV, just so I don't have slates where I put in 2250 and get back $200, right?
Yeah,
so at least I like right, a little bit more, maybe some of the lineups that I'm playing end up being duped 7 times, 12 times. Like I'm instead of playing 150, having 60 uniques, 130 under fives, and then dude, if like the 2 chalk plays come, the 2 over-owned fighters, if they both are optimal, it's like I literally have no lineup with both of them together, because the rating of that lineup would always be, under 6 or something like that, or at least under 7, like not as high. So it's like when you bake the ownership into the projection like that, then there's no need for me to use an ownership sum. There's no need for me to use exposure. The only time I'd be using exposures or any build rules is just for diversity, yes, my 16 Chase Sherman lineups are plus EV, but Jesus, do I really want to have 16 Chase Sherman lineups? I mean, like the dude's he has a 4% chance of scoring like 100 plus points. Like, do I want that?
Right. But do you need that? So here's something that I've been struggling with, and this is part of the issue with my process trying to use the over 100 points. Is what I really need is the optimal rate, right? Like you have in other sports with the Awesemo, top stacks tool, that kind of thing. They give you the optimal. I guess that top stacks tool isn't a good example, but for like NBA, they give you the optimal rate. I'm going on a little bit blind because there are fighters who, they might have a 4% chance of putting up over 100 points, but I don't know what their odds are of being in the optimal. So like maybe they have a good chance of putting up 80 points, and they're cheap enough that that's going to be in the optimal anyway. So that's what I really want. I feel like I'm going a little bit blind when I'm trying to use the top over 100 points to set my exposure caps. I'm going in a little bit blind because I don't know what I really want is the optimal. I want to know, those cheaper fighters, what odds they have. So I'm kind of blanket going in and giving them a little bit of a boost because I'm like, well, they don't need to get over 100 points. I assume that you don't do that because you are only simulating individual fights based on.
I'm not simulating anything.
I thought you were simulating fights to figure out the odds of getting over 100 points.
No, I use the betting lines. I use the betting lines and the salaries. Like I could obviously I could predict based on the weights of the betting lines on basically the correlation coefficient of the betting lines versus 100 plus point scores, 90 plus point scores, 80 plus point scores. I'll just use the odds and be like, well, based on my historical data of what types of betting lines there are, like obviously if first round finish. For a first round finish, round 1 odds, this is obviously under the efficient market hypothesis that the betting lines are like perfect, right? Of course. But I have nothing else to go by. They're the most accurate that I could get. Round 1 odds, the fighter finishes in the first round, automatically scores 90 points. So like the correlation is 1, right? It's like there's no negative points in MMA. So if you win in the first round, and it says the betting line is minus 150 or plus 150 in the first round, that's a 40% chance. So 40%, so at least 40% of the time, they score 90 plus points, right?
Right.
Now, they could also score and win in the second round inside the distance. And the inside the distance, maybe that the correlation is weaker to 100 points. So it's weighted a little bit weaker. Like the winning by submission, winning by KO. Like a KO typically involves a knockdown, right? So you get to, a winning by KO in the first round is to 100-point score very correlative, much more than a submission, right? Because you don't get the knockdown. You may get a 5-point, quick submission is not going to score 100 points in MMA, right? Look like Andrade, he did standing triangle, scored 92 points, right? Submission in the first round, no takedown, no knockdown, no nothing. So if you look at those types of things, you could go, okay, in general, I'm not simulating a fight. Going, how often does 100 plus, this fighter put up 100? How often does he put up 90? How much does he put up 80? And then depending on the price of the fighter, that goes into the rating already. Okay. So it's not like because optimal, when you say optimal, if you treat people, especially in something as binary and small player pool as MMA, everything's going to depend on everything else. Like, the reason I played more Lemos, like you had Else down there, you had Montana De La Rosa, you had the 3 big underdogs, and I'm like, using the betting lines, they're so cheap that I care more about the win than the ceiling. I don't care as much about first round win or inside the distance. Like, what's their winning potential, right? Because at a win is more correlated to an 80-point score. Obviously, it's more correlated to a 60-point score, but definitely an 80-point score. So, yes, you'd much rather inside the distance, but these fighters in a decision could possibly get 80 points and go, well, if one of the two of the 9K fighters, if one of the 9K fighters puts up 125, like, most likely, like, in order to get to get a 50K salary, you're going to need a low price fighter in those types of lineups. Now, if the 9K fight, let's say all 3 of the 9K fighters don't even put up 100, then a low price fighter putting up 88 is probably not going to be optimal, right? Because that middle build may be more optimal. So it's not just how often is this person optimal, because it's based on all the other fighters on the slate. Now, obviously, Osimo would do those types of simulations. That's where they're getting the number. So someone's optimal rate in the low end for this past slate was probably way higher than normal because the 9K fighters were just so... I mean, the odds on those fighters inside the distance in round 1 were so high that the likelihood of them scoring 110, 120, 130 points means that 90 points out of a low-price fighter would be more likely to be optimal. But, Neil, from a uniqueness perspective, a 2 9K fighter lineup, I don't want to play, right?
Right.
So if I'm not playing 2 9K fighter lineups, that means I don't care about the optimal rate of Chase Sherman, because I wouldn't be playing, because he's 8%. I'm using just pulling a number out of my ass. 8%. He's optimal. And you go, wow, that's way more than his ownership or whatever. It's like, yeah, because it relies on the fact that 2 of the 9K fighters put up a hell of a lot of points. But if you're not building lineups for that possibility, like, why the hell would I want to play Chase Sherman in lineups where I'm leaving $1,000 on the table?
Right.
Right? Because now that's not the win condition of the lineup is different. So I don't necessarily care about, like, pure optimal rates, because I'm not building chalky lineups, right? So if I added up the optimal, like, okay, let's say instead of my proprietary rating, I just plugged in the optimal rates, right? Like you would do, because you're basing your exposures based on it. And it's like, well, if I add up these 6 fighters, how often they appear in the lineup, it's some number, right? And it's like, oh, I want to play lineups that are higher with that. It's like, yeah, well, those lineups are also duped more, right? Because it's right, they're more duped. So it's like, okay, how do I get rid of all these? Well, now you're playing lineups that are much less likely combined to be optimal, and then you'll be like, well, why am I playing so much less of this guy that has? Why am I playing so much less of Romanoff than his optimal rate? And it's like, yeah, because the more Romanoff you play, the more Montana De La Rosa you have to play, right?
I suppose, yeah, if they did give me the optimal rates and I used the optimal rates and then to get different put in, a salary cap, I would probably be getting rid of the actual lineups where some of those lower end fighters are optimal. So I guess it wouldn't make sense to, that would probably be my natural inclination would be like, well, I'll use the optimal rates to, kind of give me an idea of how much I want of each fighter, but then still get unique by putting a salary cap on all of my lineups, but then that would essentially eliminate the actual optimal lineups for a lot of those fighters because the cheapest guy is probably not going to be optimal while leaving salary on the table. So I guess I see what you're saying. It's not as useful as I want it to be.
Right, like the reason that I had more Lemos than the other fighters below her is because because there were so many heavy favorites that a low price fight, like if no underdog won, typically on slates where no dog wins, a 6-win lineup isn't the winning. You can't have a 6-win lineup. So the highest scoring dog, especially if they're cheaper, ends up being optimal. So like you could have a 56-point losing fighter be in the winning lineup. Now, what's the likelihood of all the low price fight? Well, it's more likely the 5-round loser, right, is going to score more points than guys that could easily get finished in the first round and score 5 points, right? So, like, if I'm playing 9K fight, like, I'm going to play I'm going to plug in Lemos into those lineups, not because, obviously if she wins, yay, now she has 90, 100 points or whatever, but in a loss, I don't think Montana De La Rosa or Cameron Else or the 3 big underdogs even put up enough points. So it's like I'm only playing the people under Lemos for a win condition. Lemos I could play for a loss condition.
Right.
So that's why that's why her rating was much higher because of her natural projection on the slate. Now for a different slate, I may think completely the opposite. On the slate coming up, like it's much less likely that the winning lineup has a losing fighter on it because I know the Romanov fight is getting rescheduled for next week, so that's going to be he's going to be minus 1,500 again. But all the other fighters are like minus 250, minus 220. Like it's not like heavy favorites. So there could on those types of slates maybe you get 5 dogs that win. And maybe 3 of them put up 100+ points, and it's like, well, now I'm leaving $1,000 on the table. Now there's ways to go, but on slates where there's so many heavy favorites and everything, it's like number one, you're running into too few lineups if you try to jam stars and scrubs, and then if you don't play any of the top 9K fighters, now you're getting such low probability that like why am I leaving $1,000 on the table? And that's where you start running into a little bit more dupes. And now you're almost playing triage at that point of like, this isn't the best, highest EV slate for me on finding uniques, but I could still find plenty of plus EV lineups and overall have a plus EV portfolio, even though, yeah, it's going to look stupid when I win with an 8-way dupe and like, oh, yeah, I'll take $21,000. That's perfectly fine. Yeah. Right. So it is what it is, but it's primarily like the reason I don't have to use as many settings to get what I want is only because I'm beforehand just baking that directly. I'm hacking the optimizer to say, don't optimize based on fantasy points. Optimize based on this number that I made up.
Can't you just put that in as your fantasy points?
That is what I do.
Oh, okay.
I mean, that is like I import my CSV and I just changed my rating column. I just changed the name of it to FPTS. Upload to Lineup HQ, and there you go. And then it's just the highest lineup is the highest leverage lineup that you can make, and sometimes I don't even have to worry about salary caps because, like, a lineup that's 6.48, it's 49.1. Lineup that's 6.46 is 49.9. Lineup that's 6.4, like it's like the salaries don't matter anymore. It's just it is what it is. Sometimes I can run 150 lineups and I'll get I'll get 5 lineups that leave 1,200 on the table. I'll get 22 lineups that spend all 50,000. And then you look side by side, and it's like from the leverage perspective, you know, the leverage score of the 50K lineup and the 48 lineup are the same, right? It's because it's a different fight. Like that 50K lineup has just a really weird combination that most people are not going to play. And the 48 lineup is a lineup that may have a combination more people can play, and then just like two guys that you drop down, and now you get more unique there. So, like, I'm not weeding out the uniques really. The way that I weed out the uniques is just by setting more like if I built 1,000 lineups, what are most lineups that are going to be duped 10 plus times going to look like? And on this past slate, it was two $9,300 plus lineups, and I just said if I'm going to eliminate 99% of these lineups and maybe find a couple that I could play, I might as well just eliminate them all. Just fuck it. Set up a group. I set up a group that I couldn't play more than one of the large favorites in any lineup. I didn't want to play Mike Jackson and Jay Sherman in a lineup. And I didn't want to play Wright, Venata, and Montana De La Rosa. Two of those in the same, because they're all 30+% owned as dogs. It's like I don't want to play more than one of them. I would weed out all of those liners because they would be too owned. Right? So
did you weed out the winning lineup, or could you have gotten to it?
No, I could have gotten to it. It's just I only had Mike Jackson in 3 lineups. So like that's really what it came down to, is that Mike Jackson didn't rate out well, and I wasn't playing two 9K fighter type of lineups. I was less likely to play any of the 3 biggest underdogs. So I like in my 150 set, I think there was a total of 9 lineups that had one of those 3 guys. I think I had Jay Sherman in 1, Mike Jackson in 3, and Ike in 5, and Montana Del Rosa I barely had also. So I had more else Lemos, more of those but a lot of my lineups just never went underneath like 7,800. Lynn's was the cheapest guy in some of my lineups. Right?
Okay.
I'm playing Pedro, then Marc-Andre Barrio, right? And just going like right down the middle, and Kondoshko and Parsons and like that type of lineup.
Yeah.
For the people that don't follow MMA, they're probably they have no idea. But if you're playing NFL Showdown, if you're playing small field golf, this is what you should be doing. This is what you should be thinking about.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, it's still a sport that I struggle with, but I think that I'm, we talk about it every couple of weeks, so it's helping me a little bit to kind of conceptualize. I still don't have a great method for, doing what you do, but at least I'm conceptually understanding it a little bit better over time. Yeah, it's more to go on in MMA than USFL. Transitioning, how do you like that transition?
How was the second week of the USFL?
Similar to the first in that the projections were all terrible. So like, it's hard.
Projections.
So
okay, hold on. Terrible in a way of like, from 1 week's worth of data, like the teams just didn't even like the way that they played the first week and the way that they handled their personnel was just completely different the second week. Also, it's like starting from scratch again.
Yeah, exactly. And to be clear, when I say the projections are terrible, I looked at several different projection sources. So I'm not talking about the OSPO projections, although I don't think they updated the first week after like players were ruled out and stuff. Like, I think players still had projections. Maybe I didn't look at it late enough, but every projection source that I had like Jordan Teamu was looking incredible, was like the highest projected quarterback. Maybe not all of them, but he was projected really well. And then he was used in like half of the sets this week. Just like they just went back and forth between him and their other quarterback. It was ugly. And what I need to confess though is that after DraftKings leaked all of the ownership for every game in week 1, did you hear about that? So they at lock for the first game, they show the ownership for every player in every game. I didn't make any changes, which
and
I know
most people didn't, and then most people didn't make any changes.
Yeah, but it was because I looked at it and I was like, to me, it looks like the best plays, like the top projected plays, are under owned, and I'm already like, it was sort of like, I don't really know if I trust the projections. My lineups look pretty good here. Like I'm over owned on the players I want to be over owned on, and I don't have that much. So it was sort of a tough. I didn't really know what to do with it, and I also thought I don't know how much these are going to change now that other people have seen this. So ultimately, I just let it ride, and it didn't go well for me.
So moving forward with USFL, I mean, to me, it seems like the best thing to do is just treat the projections as absurdly fragile,
Yeah,
and
I think
just
that's
be as contrarian as possible, and just have combos of, well, maybe yeah, he got a 22% target share last week, but maybe he only plays
yeah,
3 slaps this week because like we don't like, especially you get the quarterbacks coming in and out. It's like
yeah,
that knocks out oh, it's like, well, I can't trust half the teams to even roster a quarterback.
yeah. Yeah, it's. I mean, so I was very successful at XFL, which I think is fairly similar. I think though the difference is I watched the XFL games. I haven't been able to watch that many of the USFL games. I
It
feel like
seems like a
watching
lot
it,
of
you
people
actually.
that haven't been able to get through a lot of the games even when they're watching it.
Yeah, yeah, I think that is true. It's kind of ugly. I mean, I've said it before. I don't really. If I have money on it, I can watch any game. I don't care how ugly it is. As long as they score a touchdown a game, I'm fine with it. Maybe I'm cheering for that. I don't know, but having money on it definitely makes it more interesting for me. But I think that there is some edge to be able to actually watch the games and hear the commentary and kind of get an idea for, I don't know, some idea for it. I kind of feel like I'm going in blind and maybe not giving myself enough time. So I'm relying on the projections a little bit more than I should be. And then I am using some. I found some ownership projections one place, so I'm using that to make adjustments. But I don't know. It has not been great for me so far.
What I do if I were to play bluntly, based on what you described, what I would do is I would aggregate projections. I would aggregate all the projections I could find. I would aggregate ownership projections or whatever I could find, and then press the optimal button, right? See what the ownership sum of that lineup is, and then just set my max of a third of that. Like literally, like I not a little bit, like just if the top owned lineup has a total ownership of 240, give me lineups with 80. Like this is how fragile the projections are. So just
Yeah,
give me eight, and then maybe you'll get a 30% owned guy in the lineup, but you also get some 5%, 2%, and so maybe that's right, but this isn't right, and this isn't fragile, or whatever. And then just wherever it leans, just there you go.
yeah.
Then like I'll get
You're getting
guys I've
better
never
with
heard of
some
in
of.
the line. I don't know. This guy
Yeah,
maybe he gets no snaps, and that's why he's 1% owned. But maybe this is the game where he gets 20. I mean, like it seems
yeah.
like from week to week, these teams don't even know who they're playing.
Yeah, and that was I remember my best week of XFL. That was what happened was a player like wasn't active the week before, and then they activated him. So I was like, oh, coming in at like 1% ownership. That I'm going to play him. And then of course he was a very high scoring player that week. And I think that the same thing happened this week. I didn't react to it this time, but it was the same thing where it's like a player was out. I think Taywan Taylor or something like that was didn't play last week, and now he's active. And nobody knows is he going to see snaps, and you should just assume that they are, like because that seems to be the way that it happens in these leagues. Yeah, I don't know. It's been a little bit frustrating because I'm like I know that there are advantages to be had here if I had the time to actually think about it and make changes, and I just haven't been able to do that so far. And I don't know if I would have had success at it anyway because it's just I don't know to what extent I can trust the projections and the ownership projections. I don't know. It's been a little bit wild so far, but I think that there is edge to be had. I think there's actually massive edge to be had in USFL, and I think that you're right. Probably just treating the projections as super fragile is the way to go.
Or you move down to Birmingham.
Or move down to Birmingham.
Right, you live there.
Uh,
They're doing all the games in the same place, right?
I think so. I haven't been. I know they did for week one. They were all in Birmingham. I'm not sure if they're always in Birmingham, but maybe they are. I know Justin Freeman went down there for week one. Looked like he had a
Really?
fun little trip. Yeah, yeah.
He was the one person at the game.
He was the one person. He got the USFL Twitter stream showed Justin Freeman with his family, like meeting the mascot and stuff. It's pretty funny.
Right, because they finally got a fan. They finally got someone to come.
Exactly. Look at this guy. He's coming to our games. You should
Right,
too.
and asking about inactives and injuries and whatever. It's like, wow, one person cares.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I should make a trip down to Birmingham. I would
Wow.
probably actually enjoy it. I mean, I think it would be fun. Maybe maybe there's so few fans that it would just not even be fun, and maybe it's more fun to watch on my TV where they tell me who the player is that has the ball. Yeah,
Are people
probably
going to the
probably
games?
stop.
I mean, I saw that there was weather or whatever, and there was like no one there for like one of the late games. I mean, I don't know. Are people
Not
watching?
many. I know that it's virtually empty. I don't know if it's like they don't allow fans. I assume that's not the case at this point because
Not in
no other
definitely not in
teams have.
Alabama. They're perfectly fine
Right,
with
right. Good
letting
point.
whatever happens. Yes.
Yeah, so maybe maybe they're just. I mean, they should make the tickets free at this point, right? Like there's no reason they shouldn't have
No, they
just
should
free
pay
tickets.
you. They should pay you to go.
Right? Yeah. I mean, really, they need some fans. Make it a little bit more interesting. Buy some concessions. Yeah, they can't be making much money. I don't know how long the USFL is going to last at this rate.
Right. What that the first question I asked before the first slate was, which comes first? DK contest having only a $5,000 prize pool, or the league folding? I don't know. I don't know which one it's going to be.
I still don't know. Which I guess is good for the XFL. That's why XFL comes first for me. So I'm a little bit concerned about XFL, USFL running into each other next year. Who knows what's going to happen? Because XFL is coming back next year. If USFL folds, that'll really simplify things for me, and I can go
Right.
back to
And
my old
The
days.
Rock ain't going to fuck it up. Right. Of course not.
No, The Rock, of course not.
Right.
He
Of
knows what's.
course. Right.
Yeah.
What's
Well,
going on with MLB?
I was just about to transition there, but I should let you lead. Yeah, it's not going well for me so far.
It's only been what, 17 days?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
two and a
and I've
half
had some
weeks.
like top 15, lineups. I've had actually some decent finishes. I just haven't had any top two lineups so far. So uh, it would have been better if I came into like last year. I was in a rut until April 21st. So we're 4 days beyond. Last year was when I hit 100,000 for NBA and really started my upswing after my big downswing to start the year. So starting a little bit late this year, but it was nice coming into MLB with a little bit more like, okay, I just had a big win in NBA, and then I won 50,000 the next day in NBA. So then it was like I was feeling great coming into the MLB. Right now, I'm already in a rut, and now I'm starting off poorly in MLB. Not enjoying it so far.
Do you notice? I mean, I brought this up last year also. I've been trying to adjust to like anti-competitiveness is a better way of
Yeah,
putting.
you looking at the top stacks tool. I think we talked about this last year that it
Right,
was
right.
the top stacks tool. Everybody's using it.
Right. Like it's very easy. It's very immediate to me that across the industry, not just at Awesomo's Top Stack Tool, that baseball doesn't draw as much of a casual audience that basketball does. Like
Yep.
NBA, like that, the fields are. I mean, they're not soft, but they're softer. NFL is obviously the most casual, but MLB, like even right at the start, it's like either you play MLB DFS or you don't type of people, and people that play MLB DFS are more likely to have their own projections and at least look at tools like that to some extent, or at least hear shows that mention this stack is under owned and that stack's over owned. And with everyone looking at very similar things, like, oh, I'm going to play the Astros at low ownership. They're going to be 6% owned and they're under owned, and you go in and they're not, and all the players are like 11 and 12% owned.
Right.
And it's like, okay, that's like efficient owned. Like they're not over owned, but they're not a leverage stack anymore. And I look at that and go, yeah, well, because they had the highest leverage score in Awesomo's top stack tool. So
Yeah.
people are like, everyone's playing the Phillies. I'm going to play the Astros, and like that type. Like it just like I have to bake that in. What I've been doing is I've been just if it shows up too high on tools, I just bump up the ownership and then reduce the amount. Like I almost have to, because
Yeah.
almost every time, like I review the slate and I go, oh, the whoever I was higher on was always higher owned. Was almost
Yep.
always, maybe not enough that I shouldn't be playing, but the amount of leverage that I thought I was getting, I was not getting. Right, so the lineups
only
weren't
place that's
as
not
good as I
happening
thought.
The only place that's not happening is the actual like really ugly stacks. Like today, San Francisco going up against Corbin Burns. I
Right,
don't think that they're going to get up in ownership because people are like, "Well, I'm not going to play San Francisco." Like they'll
right.
do it for the stacks that make some sense to them. I don't think that it happens as much on the ends, or at least on that end of the stacks. That it's like they're coming in at 1%, but they've got a 3% chance of being optimal. Which I will still play them, but I think a lot of people are just like, I'm not going to bother playing San Francisco because I'm going to play Corbin Burns instead. So I think that it doesn't happen as much on the ends, but I think that everywhere else, it's like, yeah, if they have an 8% chance of being the top stack and they're coming in at 5%, they might actually come in at 8%. Yeah, it's definitely a concern for me that I have not adjusted for yet, and haven't adjusted for now that I'm doing MLB shows. I'm using primarily the top stack tool. I'm talking about, well, this stack looks like it's going under owned or over owned, which I think that I'm sort of unique among Awesemo guests or analysts, I guess, at this point in talking mostly about the stacks. Like I listen to other shows and they're talking about the individual batters, and I'm like, oh, maybe I should be doing a little bit more work there. It's just not really how I play. So I'm usually talking about, well, this stack looks like it's under owned, and I'm going to like them for that reason. I don't know. It's
Well, you're more like me. I mean,
struggle.
that's the same thing on when I'm on Grinders Live on Roto Grinders. It's like we're going position by position. Who plays MLB DFS that way? Like that's
Yeah.
like
But like I look at the YouTube chat, and that's the question I get: who's the best shortstop today? And I'm like, no idea. Like it's whoever fits in your stack the best is generally my answer. So
or if you were the
yeah,
best, you just whoever's the highest projected, right? Like
yeah, that
Trey
is kind of
Turner.
what
There, he's the best
exactly.
shortstop. Or do you want
Points per
raw
dollar.
or point per dollar? It's like point per dollar. It's this guy.
Yeah,
But that's not really how you play MLB DFS. You don't.
yeah.
Because
That's the thing. It's
even
like,
because even people would ask me, it's like, okay, I get it's about lineups and not players, I get it, but if I'm playing one offs, should I play this guy or that guy? It's like whatever fits in the total lineup. Like I don't
right.
if I'm playing 5-1-1-1, you know, the 5X type of thing. It's like, well, it's whatever stack plus the pitcher and whoever's projected the most. If it's a $3,400 hitter, and then it's that guy. It's like I'm not like I tell I say it more bluntly on shows maybe than you would do. I mean maybe it's counterintuitive to like content sites, but I view MLB DFS as like the easiest game. Like people overthink it like to the nth degree.
Yeah,
Where I've told multiple people that have not played them. Like these are people that are transitioning from NBA or NFL. It's like I don't watch baseball, but I like to play MLB DFS. Can I want to just be competitive? I don't want to have to do that much work or whatever. It said this is what you do. Okay, said you don't have to look at anything. Said okay, this is what you look at the team totals. Okay, let's just go by team total. Okay, and you look at so you still have projections, median projections of some type, and team total. He said, out of the top 5 team total teams, take 2 of them, have 5 from one team, 3 from the other, and whatever 2 pitchers that project the best that fit in, build that lineup. If you want to build 5 of those lineups, build 5 of those. If you want 5 of the each one of those teams, then do 5 3, and whatever, and let the projections determine what the other 3 people are. Let the projections determine what 5 batters from that team is. And just build those lineups. Build 5 of those lineups. It said most likely, if you did that 5 minutes before the slate, and you built 3 to 5 lineups like that, by the end of you're building plus EV. You're going to most likely have plus EV. Whether or not that you actually realize the EV is a different story. If you want to be diverse in your 5 lineups versus, have the same stack in all 5 with a different 3-man or a different bit, that's up to you. That's too advanced for that. I just dude, just pick 2 teams. 5-3, 4-4 on FanDuel, even 4-4 in DraftKings, whatever. Just pick 2 teams. Pick the highest projected pitchers that fit in for their prices in there. And if you just did that, most likely, if people did that, they would be more successful than putting in the 2 or 3 hours of whatever they're doing work or mental energy doing anything. Like at worst case scenario, you're about equal. So my opinion when it comes to stuff like that is that if what you're doing is a coin flip, that means you should be spending the least amount of time on it because it doesn't matter if you do it or not. So when you're trying to, should I play this one off or that one off? Should I play this thing or that thing? Should I play more of this and more? Like a lot of times it's just like dude, just pick 2 fucking teams. Just pick 2 teams. Pick 2 teams randomly. Maybe that dude, for a really new player that's like, I don't know anything about baseball. I don't even know what team total. I don't even want to look at that. It's like, dude, just go into your app. You want to build one lineup that has a chance of winning first place in a GPP? Just pick pick 2 pitchers, pick 5 from one side, pick 3 from the other side, and make sure you spend all 50,000 of your salary, or at least most of your salary. Yeah,
Don't
yeah.
play pitcher
Occasionally
against
they'll
the
get
stack.
the 2 shittiest teams. Yeah, occasionally, and the projection will be really low, and you'll really need luck to But you really can't be that far off,
Yeah,
even doing that, right?
that's it. You and I have talked about it. Like MLB, we spend the least time on. I did run into an issue this week when I yesterday gave myself 8 minutes to create 150 lineups. Just ran into some things and couldn't do them before that. And of course, Fantasy Cruncher was down, and then I went to a different optimizer, and I went to the Roto-Runners optimizer, and it actually was very intuitive. So like I had 4 minutes to make 150 lineups using an optimizer I've never used before, and I failed by about 30 seconds, I think.
Okay, so
So I
you
think
still didn't work out.
so luckily I put in a dummy stack that just didn't use the lot games, and then Fantasy Cruncher came back up, so I was able to get back in. I just didn't use any players from the first 2 games, so
Right,
wasn't
lineup
the worst
HQ
thing in the
isn't
world.
bad.
No, it was actually I was impressed, and it allows you to within a 150 crunch set like I want this number to be 5 3 stacks, this number to be 4 4 stacks. So like it did have some things that I liked about it.
Right, but I mean, to use it as your backup
Yeah,
is, I mean,
I think I'll be able to use it from now on for sure as my backup. Yeah,
right, because I do the same thing. But I mean, obviously FC is not it's
right.
not
You
what I
don't use
use,
it.
nor is my backup. Right.
Yep.
I'll use Fantasy Labs.
Yeah.
Right. Even though
Just
I'm not a
important to have two, to
right.
have a backup. And I've used the roto grinders before. I don't think for baseball, but I have used it for another sport before, and I've used a couple different optimizers. Um, but yeah, with usually I have more time to do so. This is like literally like, oh shit, Fantasy Cruncher being down right now is not ideal for me. So that was a little bit rough.
Right, but I mean, but in MLB, like really, to me, it just comes down to pitchers and teams.
Yeah,
That's it.
no, yeah. So that's the reason that you and I think, both say that we can do it. You can come in 15 minutes before lock, and I can basically do what I would do anyway. If I have half an hour, 45 minutes, I'm not doing all that much different. I might spend a little bit more time crafting my individual stacks and like getting to exactly what I want, but not really. Like I'm mostly just I'm either setting a like looking at the top stacks tool, the top pitches tool, and just setting a max cap exposure on each stack and just keeping it uniform across all stacks. Or if I have more time, I will go in and look at the actual like probability of being the top stack versus the ownership. And that's if I have more time, I'll spend a little more time crafting how much I want individual stacks. But last year I was plenty successful just setting 10 game slate, 7% cap on every stack, every 5-man stack, 12% on my secondary stack. And I was plenty successful just doing that because you're just, creating a large enough mesh of different lineups that, some are going to have a shot.
Right, and that could be good enough. I'm playing much more exploitively, and just I want more of the under-owned stacks, and I want less of the over-owned stacks. I like it just
I mean, that's me too when I have the time.
right when you have the extra time, right? But you're still building competitive lineups, and with the one, like, to me, I'm much more likely to build one construction than try to build multiple constructions. So I based it on the context of a slate. So the
Me too.
lower scoring, like if the team totals are low across the board, I'm more likely to on DK to go 5x, right? Where there may not be two teams that put up a lot of runs. There just may be one team that puts up a lot of runs, and I'll just need to find the home run from this game and the home run from that game. So I want the one-offs there. So on a lower scoring slate, I'm primarily building 5x. And then on a slate where there's like 4 teams that have 5.6 plus run totals or something like that, it's like now I'm primarily building 5-3 lineups, right?
Yep.
And then it just comes down to how much of each do I want more of the under-owned, less of the over, and then I just let go run. And then the pitch, I set a cap on pitchers, and then like what more? And then if I'm doing the 5x style lineups, typically if I have time, which I typically do, is that I'll use in lineup HQ the OIS button, the only in stacks button, to not get the slap hitter types. I don't want Nicky Lopez as a one-off. I don't want like those. Like I want big power hitters as one-offs primarily. You don't have to do it, but if I were to build 1,000 lineups, I'd probably weed out those lineups for the whatever. I'm not even playing 150. I'm playing 60 or something. So it's like Like how much Sergio Alcantara should I have? Should I have 8 lineups with him? And is it a one-off? Only because he's 2,100 and it allows me to pay up for 2 10K pitchers. And it's like, I'd rather have the lineups that have the 7K pitcher and a better batter. So using that OIS button, I just go through team by team. I go through all the teams that I have stacks of, and I just go only in stack, only, those types of hitters. Yeah, and then if I'm doing 5X lineups, obviously I'm doing 5-3. I don't give a shit anymore because I'm stacking 3 guys. I don't care as long if they're with other people. I don't give a shit. They're all going to be
in stacks, yeah.
Right, they're already in stacks. So, but that's the. I mean, like, dude, we talked for 5 minutes, like that, like, dude, if your process is that much more than what we discussed, and like even the top players, even guys that do simulations on the contest or whatever. I mean, they're doing pretty much the same thing and just letting the chips fall where they may. Like, how much more, like, if you just did what we just said, you'll be competitive. Right? How profitable you be, I don't know. But your lineups doing that may be better than what you're currently doing and spending more time on.
So probably more plus EV.
Right.
Yeah, it's funny. You talk about the different types of slates. You want to do different types of. So far this year, I've just been doing 5-2s essentially. But last year, I switched it up frequently. I did 4-4s, 4-3s, 5-2, 5-3.
But the difference, the edge you're getting out of that is probably very minimal.
Yeah, it is probably very minimal. But I spent more time thinking about it. But so to start my first show hosting, I got a little bit of an angry response from somebody saying, "Wow, these guys are 20 minutes." So me and Terry McBride were on, and I wanted to start the show. Of course, talking about. So I said, so on a slate like this, what kind of construction are you looking for? This is a large slate. There are these types of. So I want to talk about the construction because to me, that's like these are the things that you need to think about first. What type of slate is this? What kind of lineups? And of course, the response I got is 20 minutes in, they haven't even started talking about the lineups yet. They're still talking about the slate construction, the lineup construction. I was like, man, I don't know what to tell you. Like this is how you win at MLB DFS. Like you need to be thinking about the types of lineups that you want to play more so than you need to be talking about these are the batters I like for this team.
The more and more that you do content and you do shows, are you getting more towards? I've been doing content for so even soccer since 2016, 2017. The more and more you content, are you more towards like my side of like no matter you could explain 100% of what you know, and you're like, well, I don't think 95% of the people are actually gonna like you just you just go like I'm actually trying to really fucking help you.
Yeah.
And it's just like no, who's gonna do it? Who's hitting a home run today? How many is so and so gonna get 8 strikeout? Like dude, I'm teaching you how to play DFS.
I've been on your side of that spectrum. I've definitely been on that side where it's like, yeah, I mean, there's nothing magical about what I do. I think the better players are going to pick up on it, are going to like hear what I'm saying and learn from it, and the worst players are not going to. I've been with you on that. That I'm
right.
I'm very transparent. Everything that every show I do, I'm not really withholding much. I mean, someone was like NFL show, I'm not going to tell you exactly where I'm setting my salary cap, that kind of thing. Like,
right, only because you have worry about dupes, right? It's the same thing in MMA. Like people ask me for my sheet, and I go, I can't give you, or they ask me for my formula on certain I can't give you it's like, but I have no problem. Like, I'll sort by rating and then put it in a separate sheet and to just like sort it by top to bottom and go, here would be my rankings. So you can get a sense of who I'm going to have more of and who I'm going to have less of. But if I give you the actual numbers, like you're more likely to get my exact lineups. Right. So I dupe wise for small, like if it was baseball, I wouldn't give a fuck because the likelihood of being duped is so I don't even care. I mean, I don't even think about it on large slates, especially. So like that's the only one thing that I can't. It's not because I'm this guy's overowned, this guy's underowned. Like I'm telling you, and feel free to do whatever. But I still get to argue. Oh, that guy's not overowned. That guy's never gonna win. It's like he's 21% chance of winning inside the distance, but he's never gonna win, type of thing. But it's like the more like you're still in the honeymoon phase, or maybe I'm just more in like the completely jaded phase. That's like I
mean, you still do it. You do it more than just about anybody. So
right, I don't mind. See, to me, the people I relate to the best, audience wise, are the experienced people. Because I get a lot out of those conversations. The people that already get all of it, and they're trying to really, they're 95% of the way there, and they're trying to get to 96, 97, 98. And
Yeah.
we're bouncing ideas. Maybe I tried this, and I go, that's interesting. Have you thought of these 3 problems with that methodology? This is what maybe you get too much, and then maybe they come back, and they 2 days later, like, yeah, I tried it, and then maybe I love those conversations, but of course it's over the heads of like 90% of the audience, and then I don't mind like the new people. Like I just started playing DFS 2 months ago. It's like I can't fault them for not knowing stuff because I didn't know stuff 2 months in. So I enjoy teaching the really new people of like, let's start from scratch. What do we, how is this set up this way? And they're not in that mindset of 5 years of who's going to hit the home run today, right? The outcome based thinking that you can they're typically much nicer and like, yeah, I like, even though I'm repeating things that I've said 7 million times, I feel like I'm actually helping someone. It's the people that have been playing for 3 or 4 years that are still at the stage of looking at me like I have 14 heads, yet still tuning into shows, wondering what stacks I like. Right? And not understanding that's like, I like this stack not because I think they're going to do well, it's because their probability of doing well is above their ownership. And right? And they only have an 8% shot at doing well, so 92% of the time the team's going to fucking suck. So like, don't come at me like, oh, you picked that team, or especially in baseball. Like baseball, MLB DFS is the sport where I primarily play GPP. I don't really play cash games, and I lose like 90+% of the like 90+% of the time the way I play. It's like I am playing for like 2 or 3 days a season.
Yeah.
Right? So people could watch my show and go like, oh yeah, you said you were high on X, Y, and Z stacks. Well, they did horrible. I said, yeah, I expected them to do it. Like, they were low probability, right?
Yeah. They only had a 4% chance of being the top stack. I told you that. They just were only owned 2%. Like, so that's why I like them.
Right.
Yeah,
but aren't you going to go broke doing that? It's like, no, well, 1 or 2 out of 150 slates, that is going to be the top stack. It's going to be low owned. I'm going to have all the relative value, and I'm going to win $100,000.
Yeah.
And that's going to make up for everything else, and I'm going to have a, $40,000-$50,000 profit from doing so. And if I do that twice with a 50K or maybe a 40K second, next thing you know, it's like, oh, I've lost 94% of my slates, and I've won $180,000. And you're like, well, how do I do that? It's like by playing the plus EV lineups and losing a lot.
Yeah.
Often. Not a lot necessarily financially. A lot of times you get money back or whatever. I mean, you could go on a downswing like that. But it's I think the number one mentality that it's hard, even new players. Like I had one person in my Discord channel in Roto Grinders that did very well this past NBA season, using a lot of the principles that, he learned a lot from my course and everything. Did well last year in MLB, and it said to me, it's like, I don't know if I think my process is off. This MLB season, like I just can't even find a winning day. I said, it's been 17 days.
Yeah.
Like it's been like, just like, do you understand how small of a sample 17 days in? And the fact that if everything was equal, if for GPPs, your lineup would lose 78% of the time if it pays 22% of the field. 78% of the time, your expectation should be that you get no money back from that lineup, right? People's expectation seems to be that, like, well, if that's the case, I shouldn't lose 10 days straight. It's like, well, you can actually calculate the probability of that, right?
Yeah.
And if you're going to be playing for years upon end, you're going to have a period where you lose money 10 days in a row. There's going to be even cash games, right? I lost 5 days in a row. People would be like, oh, NBA cash games. And be like, dude, I lost 5 days in a row. I go, and? Like what? It's 5 days in a row. Yeah, if you tell me you lost 23 days in a row, in cash games, maybe there's more likelihood that something's fucking wrong.
Yeah.
But 5? Like 5 is nothing.
Very small sample size.
17 days in MLB is, dude, there's been 17 slates.
Yeah.
Like what are you expecting?
Highly variant sport. Yeah, it's tough. So far, I feel like there have been days early on. I was like, I'm getting close, feeling good. Okay, I'm back where I was last year. I'm getting within, I'm top 20. I have a lineup in the top 20 feeling good. And then, this past week I hit a rut where I had like several days in a row where I'm like 50 points out of first place or like 60, just like not even close to first place. And then it's like, man, this is rough. Do I need to like change something? But ultimately that's just kind of how it goes with MLB. Like sometimes you don't have the two stacks together that you need to have, and you're just not going to come close to winning. And you kind of need to accept that.
Right, or the one-off, right. It's like the guy that hit 3 home runs, you have in 3 lineups, and that's it.
Right.
And it's not like he's that owned. He's only like 4% owned as it is. And it's
Yeah.
just like, well, and in those lineups, you have the pitcher that got blown up with -8. It's like, you just don't have the you just don't, just like in MMA this past Saturday. It's like I was over on all the people that won that were under-owned, and all the over-owned fighters lost or didn't fight at all, right? And
Yep.
just for the fact that I only had 3 Mike Jackson lineups was the difference between a lot of money. Obviously going to the last fight, you didn't even need Mike Jackson because no one had that optimal. Like no one had the optimal of if Limo scored 98.46, Linz is in the lineup in my lineup with 891 points, even though Jackson for 1,000 cheaper is 97. It's just that no one has that 49K. No one in the contest had. That is the optimal, but no one has it. No, so I don't give a fuck, right? So I didn't need, but for the one that did win, you needed him, and I had 3. If I would have had 10 lineups, I still may not have even had that lineup to split 2 ways anyway. So it's like, it's one of those things. The difference between first place and 1,000th place or 100th place could be you got everything except for one little thing wrong, and that's it, right? And then like not wrong as far as like you made a bad decision, just
right.
it just
didn't go your way.
It just didn't go right. You're sitting there going, I got in baseball. It could be the type of thing where I got the 5 threes, I got the stacks perfectly, right? But I have 20% of my lineups are this combination of the 2 teams that scored the most runs. But in none of those 20 do I have the 34-point scoring player from that team and the 34-point scorer player of the other. Like it just so happens that even though I stacked both those teams, I just didn't have like that.
Right,
and then I have the one combination of those 2 players that put up 30 plus points. I have the pitcher that only has 4.
Yeah.
Right? Like that. And it's like you look at the lineup and go, if it just was switched out to that other player, I would have won first place by 6 points. And because of that, I'm like 18 points down and I'm sitting in 112th place. And it's like yeah, you're almost playing for like a nut in large field. Like you almost need the nuts. Obviously you don't need the nut.
You don't need them.
Right.
But by stacking, you eliminate the number of things, some of the things that you need to go right, but you don't eliminate all of the things you need. You still need a lot to go right to win. So yeah, it's hard even for experienced players. It's hard for me to be like, man, I haven't had a first, haven't had a second, I haven't had a third yet. Like, you start
17
feeling like,
days.
Exactly. I know that conceptually. I'm aware that it is small sample size and that people go in ruts. I'm not overly concerned about it at this point, but we'll love a win.
Right, but you're also playing 150. Me, I play
Yeah.
I play a much higher risk with less lineups. Like on this like last week or whatever, I had a good I think I made five grand or whatever. Like I have no problem with like, oh, it's Phillies and Coors, and I just literally X them out.
Yeah.
Like I just like I'm only building 40 lineups, and I'm just going. These 5 guys are the 5 highest owned hitters on the slate. It's like a 5-game slate, and it's like 46%, 40%, 32%, 27%. Like, dude, I'm not even playing these guys as one-offs. Just fucking, I'm Xing them out, hoping the Phillies fail, and that was the slate the Phillies fucking failed.
Yeah.
And I had the right combination. I didn't come in first or whatever. I came in like 8th, but I got like 3rd in like the $88 tournament for like 2,500 or something. Like it all added up. But I was only playing a very small handful of lineups, so it's just like, what's the easiest path for me to win, right? I'm just going to do those paths, and if one of those paths win, then I win. If the Phillies put up 12 runs, I get 0 back, and it's just. But instead of putting in, I'm not putting in $2,000, $3,000 worth of volume. I'm putting in
Makes it tough.
$400 to $600 worth of volume. So like, if that goes to 0, that's no problem. I'll just do that enough slates. And when it hits, when I make five, like when I put in 400 and I get back, 53 something or like that's good profit. And it would be the same amount of profit if I played 150 lineups for $2,500. So it's like I still would have only gotten back like 5,400 anyway. I mean, like, so it's like I'm more inclined to just look at a slate and go, who's the chalky SP2 on this slate? And it's like, oh, everyone's playing Kyle Gibson. That doesn't seem like a good idea, right? Knowing Kyle Gibson's pass, it's like, who's out? The Rockies outside of Coors? Yeah, I'm playing 5 lineups tonight, and 2 of them will be Rocky stacks. And 2 of my lineups will have Gibson in it, right? So it's like, if he does well, I have it. And if he doesn't do well, I got that also. Or I could just choose to say, fuck it, I just X him out, right? Oh, everyone's playing the Dodgers tonight. Okay, just X him out. Like, not even as one-offs. It's like, I just want to minimize the amount of things that I need to get right. So, like, I'm just assuming that you're not going to need a Dodger, right? The Dodger stack doesn't go off, and none of the Dodgers are, yeah, maybe 2 of them do hit a home run. But the 18 points they have, I could probably get from some other guy that's 5% owned anyway, as long as no one has a ceiling.
The whole stack goes off, or one player has 2 home runs, which I rarely do that. I rarely completely eliminate a team. I'm more likely to just eliminate them as my primary stack and still use.
But you're playing 150. I can understand being more diversified. Yeah, I can understand the managing your risk like that. But if I'm playing 5 lineups tonight,
right?
Like, dude, I just said, dude, I'm playing the lowest owned line. I'm playing the Diamondbacks. I don't give a shit, right? Yeah. Right, I'm taking bullet. I'm playing lineups to win first place. I can't be scared to close the laptop. I think that right. So, and especially in baseball, right? So many people are like, well, like on that slate where I told people, it's like I'm just Xing out the Phillies, and they're like, well, what happens if the Phillies put up 12 runs? I go, well, then I lose. Like. Am I? Someone's gonna come and behead me? What is the worst thing that happens?
Yeah.
But what happens if you play the Phillies? But if you play the Phillies and they put up 12 runs, then I have the same amount of points as 40% of the goddamn line or something. That doesn't mean I win anything, right? Yeah. But I know that if the Phillies don't put up a lot of runs, if they only put up 2 runs, I have a bunch of shots at winning, and I don't have to choose who I have with the Phillies. All I have to do is not have the Phillies. Right? It's one of those things that you're building lineups based on who you don't have. Right. So, like, if I on that slate, I think I built like 40, 60 lineups, something like that. And once I X'd out the Phillies, I'm just like, I don't even care the combinations of I wasn't like over owned. I'm just like, no, I just want to have combinations of all these other teams. Yeah. Right. I want lineups that don't have Phillies in it, and I don't care if the Rangers do well. I don't care if the Dodgers do well. I don't care. I just don't have Phillies, and most of these lineups will have Phillies, and hopefully I have and I had the combination of the 2 stacks and whatever. Not high enough to get first, but I have to know that, yes, they have a 24% shot at being the top stack. Yes, I get it. Right. They're 24%, and the next highest stack is 10%. Yes, I get it.
So I was I think on the other side of you for the Phillies, just because they were under-owned in the top stack. So I think that most of the series in Coors, they were coming in at like 22% owned, but 25% chance of being the top stack. And so then I was like, all right, I guess I can go slightly over the field on the Phillies, but I do it with some unease. Like anytime a lineup is that chalky, I'm a little bit like, do they really have a better shot than this? And I trust the Sims generally because they've been good to me in the past, but I always question that. And you probably because you adjust for, well, they're going to come in higher owned than that because they're the Phillies and Coors and people want to play them. So then you end up seeing that they're over owned and you just don't want to play a lineup.
That, and also I have a much more macro look at baseball, or macro. I mean, I have a macro look at DFS in general. Baseball is so failure driven that like having a batter before 40% owned, like I don't have to look at optimal. Like, dude, the success rate of batters. How often will not having him kill me? Because even if Bryce Harper at 46% owned on a 5-game slate gets 18 points, that still doesn't kill me. I mean, he could hit a 2-run home run, 3-run home run, and you still may not even need him. So it's like, why am I playing 40% owned batters? It's like it's macro wise, I don't play Ohtani's 38% owned. The only way he kills me if he puts up more than a home run, really. So like, why am I eating that? Pitchers I don't mind as much because they're a little bit less variance, but. So that's why my macro when I it doesn't matter what the tool says, it doesn't matter what the simulations say. It's like I ain't playing teams where if I play this 5-man stack, it represents 17% of the lineups in the entire contest of that exact 5-man combo. Like that from a macro perspective, it makes no sense to me. Even if you tell me, well, that really has a slightly more chance of winning. It's like, dude, I could find plus EV lineups that don't have the Philly. I mean, like, it's one of those things where it's not wrong to play the Phillies, depending on the types of lineups that you build, right? And you built properly leveraged lineups with the Phillies in them. The Phillies were under-owned slightly based on their exorbitant percentage shot at being the top stack, but it's not like, well, if you X'd out the Phillies, can you find 150 plus EV lineups? Your answer would be yes, right? But there are also lineups that are plus EV with the Phillies in it. So how many of those do I like? Do you want those? I just chose to eliminate, just like with the MMA contest of like, I didn't want to play Wright, Montana De La Rosa, and Veneta in the same lineup because they're all going to be 30% owned as dogs. And I'm like, are there lineups with 2 of them in it that are plus EV? Yes, there are. There just aren't as many of them. So I could choose to play some of them if I wanted to. I chose that I'm only building 150 lineups. I'm just going to eliminate all of them, right? I'll find 150 that don't have 2 in those. You're doing this. I'm doing the same thing with the Phillies in that example of like, you are building plus EV Phillies lineups. I'm just saying I could find 40 lineups, 60 lineups that don't have the Phillies. And I'm just taking on the risk more of, well, if the Phillies are the top stack, then I lose everything. But if the Phillies aren't, I can't, like every lineup I played that day, I cashed 100% of my lineups.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense, especially in that scenario where there is a team coming in at over 20% on a decent sized slate. It seems intuitive that you can make so many good lineups without using them. So why even bother? But yeah, like you said, I'm doing 150 lineups, so I got to take on a little bit less risk, and so I make some of those lineups. But
right, but it's counterintuitive that most casual players or regular players that just aren't experienced or anything, stupid players, if you want to call them, think counter the opposite, right? Oh, you have 150 lineups. You can make all, obviously you can make all the combos, which you can't, right? Like they think in terms of if you have 150 lineups, you could take on a lot more risk, right? They're like, oh, the only reason you had a Diamondback, the San Francisco stack against Burns is because you're playing 150 lineups and you have 3 of them, so you could afford to play 3 out of 150. And I'm only playing 3 lineups, so I can't take on the risk of having the Giants. It's like, no, you're in more position to take on the risk. Because you're only playing 3 lineups.
Risk. You're putting in $45.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's the complete opposite. I understand why in 150 lineups, you're going to play some chalkier stacks and try to get as diversified so you don't bleed money for weeks on end. And next thing you're like, what happened to $250,000? Right?
Exactly.
Until you hit something that comes in. I mean, I understand that. You'd rather get some equity back. Like you'll have a lot of days where you lose 30%.
Right.
But it's better to lose 30% than lose 80%. So like, and you're still building plus EV lineups, and it's those I'm only playing 1 lineup. So, right. So like on this slate coming up, obviously if people are listening afterwards, we have like Gibson and Berrios as cheap SP2s that may be chalky on DraftKings. And I'm like, you know what I'm doing? I'm playing 5 lineups. I'm playing 1 stack against each of them. Right. Yeah. And someone with like 1 lineup will go, well, what should I do? It's like, what I would do is I would play either the Rockies or the Red Sox against the chalky SP2. And they go, well, what happens if it does? Like, it's one of those things. Like, well, then you just lose. It's like, well, can I play the Dodgers? Why can't they just play? I only have 1 lineup, so I want to play the Dodgers, Gibson, and Scherzer. I said, okay, that's if your goal is to min cash, that's a very good lineup. But it's like you're only playing you're playing $15, right? Like in comparison to your bankroll, what is $15? It's like nothing. So why aren't you playing the highest EV lineup you possibly can? Because your risk is only 15 is 0.02% of your bankroll or something like dude, stack against Burns in that lineup. Like do something, play fucked up. plus the high leverage, that's when you should be. If you're telling me you have 150 entries, Xing out Burns and stacking the Giants in 150 lineups, they're all plus EV, but like they'll come in once in a blue moon, and you have all the combos, dude. If Burns gets blown up for 10 runs, you're gonna come in first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. You're gonna be all over there. But like you're gonna win the entire lobby. You're gonna win like $500,000 or something. And yeah, but you're gonna lose $500,000 doing that every day with 150 lineups.
Yeah.
Playing like that. So people don't get that.
The hard thing for people with so few lineups is that generally they're wanting to have fun too. So they're like, well, if I just play these San Francisco stacks, I'm going to be dead, 30 minutes or an hour into the slate. They're going to have 0 runs. Burns is going to be going off. So they don't want to take those risks because they're partially in it just for the fun of it. And it's very unlikely to hit. There's, a 3%, 4% chance of this giant stack going off. So they're like, well, I don't want to just put in such a low risk lineup. So I understand why the hesitation for people who are only playing a few lineups to play those, really positive EV stacks that over the long run are going to be good and you want to play ultimately. But I can understand why they don't want to, because they don't want to, take that big of a. They don't want to be dead so quickly, and
right.
I don't know.
Well, I've heard
want you to have fun, but
Neil, I've heard that in MMA. I've had people that play like 3 lineups or something like that, right? A small amount of lineups, not even one line. Some maybe even with one. I had one person. I think there was a couple of weeks ago that said that he plays 3 lineups, and in one of those 3, he will always play a fighter from the first fight. And I go, why? Like what does the order of the fights matter? Like all at one time, and you know what the response is? Because if one of the fighters from the first fight is a slate breaker, at least I have one live lineup. Right? It's that
fight when your fighter loses. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's the type of thing where if the first fight of the night, the favorite scores 137 points, and you're playing 3 lineups, and you don't have him at all. It's like dude, you're gonna need that is going to be the winning GPP lineup. He's going to be in it, and you don't have it, right? So it's one of those things. 3 seconds into a slate, you know that you can't win first. It's that fear of missing out, right? Yeah. Right? Of like, oh well, now my sweat sucks because I can't enjoy the next 11 fights because I can't possibly win first. So it's more enjoyable to have this quote safety of no matter what the first fight is, I'm going to have both sides of the first fight. Like, then what does it make the difference of the second fight, right? The second fight breaks the slate, and you don't have that. It's like, well, at least, the response was, well, at least it's not the first fight.
Right. I got 20 minutes extra enjoyment out of it.
Right.
I mean, it's like you spend a long time trying to make your lineups. Some people might spend 2 hours trying to craft their 3 MMA lineups. I kind of get it. I understand that you want to have some fun with it. You want some entertainment factor. It's just you have to, as long as you do it, understanding that these are negative EV decisions.
Right. If you're doing it if you're playing for entertainment, fine, do whatever you want. But you shouldn't be asking me advice. Just click 6 fighters and gives a shit. Right. There are people. There are people. I mean, we see it every MMA card of people that stack the first 3 fights.
Right. Yeah.
Right. The EV of that lineup is pretty much 0.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how it's not
a catastrophic world event where the entire, something ends. There's a terrorist attack after the 3rd fight, and now the slate is over and they've won. I think is the only plausible way that lineup wins. Or there's maybe the electricity goes out in the building, they can't continue the card. I don't know. Maybe they're playing for those kinds of scenarios.
Right.
I don't know.
But it's a type of thing that if you did that, most likely you have a screenshot, right? Right. You're sitting in first place. You're right. You're sitting in first, and sometimes you're sitting in first place. Like some people, you can always tell after the first fight. It's like, okay, 18 people stacked the first fight, right? Because you just look at the top and go, 1 to and 19th place is the favorite fighter only, and it's like, well, thanks for paying the rake, right? Yep. Type of thing, and then out of those 17 lineups, then it's like, 6 lineups stacked the first 2 fights.
Yep.
Right, and then sometimes 2 people stack the first 3 fights. It's like, dude, you were duped.
Yeah, you didn't even get to enjoy your solo screenshot.
Right, your 0 EV divided by 2. Probably that's what they're thinking. They're like, if my lineup has literally 0 EV, dividing it by 2 shouldn't matter. It's still
Right.
0,
Who
right?
cares?
Right. Who cares if I'm duped?
I
What
wonder.
does
I
it
wonder if
matter?
these are tout sites. Like they're trying to get this screenshot of. They're just gonna take a
No,
screenshot
no.
of their lineup.
It's always random. It's always random. Whatever.
Okay.
And I've also seen people dupe themselves that way. I've seen. There was one slate where one person stacked the first fight in 3 of their lineups, and I'm just like, why? What do you do? But I mean, that's to me, that's the dead money in MMA.
Yeah.
I mean, people stack the
Thank
main
you.
event too much, so you see that. But I mean, that at least seems somewhat reasonable, right? Even though I don't do
Sure.
it typically. But stacking the first 3, I mean, like, but it's that type of and some people have the complete like you could go by that mentality in both directions, right? So let's say you have the person because you could think the other way also. So you have the one person that's like, I gotta play, and I'm playing 3 lineups. I'm gonna play both fighters from the first fight just in case they put up a big score. At least I could sweat past the first fight. It's like, okay. There are some people that think the opposite way. And they go, I don't play any of the fights early so I could have hope.
Right.
Right? Because it's like, even if, let's say the first fight, there's a $9,300 fighter puts up 137 points. You could at least tell a mental story to yourself like, well, there's 11 fights left, and maybe there's 2 or 3 fighters that actually beat 137.
They put up 140. Yeah.
Right? They could put up 140. Like, it could, because we don't know yet.
Yeah.
Right? So they go, well, I don't want to play early fights because I want to, as long as I have 6 open spots, anything could happen. Even though the past 3 fights had 120 plus point scores from 7,100 underdogs, there's still a shot. There's still a chance.
Yeah.
Right? So you could think either way is you're thinking wrong.
Right.
But it's not like, oh, I understand one, but don't understand the other. No, they're both the same. Like you're still, it's just like, are they hot or they do, right? You can look at the same data and go, well, this guy hit home runs in the past 3 games. He's hot, right? And then it's like, well, this guy has struck out 4 times in the past 3 games. He's due. It's like,
right.
Like what? Like that's the complete opposite of one. When is one hot and one due at a given time? You'll never like. That's why streaks are like Hardy will always say. It's like you can't predict streak because when does it end? You can't predict when it ends. You can only see after the fact it was a streak, but you don't know how long that is if they do exist like that. And the same thing for slumps. This guy's in a 5-game slump. It's like, well, is it going to be a 7-game slump? Is it going to be an 8-game slump? Or is it only going to be a 5-game slump? Because the point in which it's not a slump? The game where he hits the right. So when does that happen? And some people think, well, now he can't be on a 6-game slump, so that's due tonight. And some people are like, well, it's a 5-game slump. This is going to last forever, right? Like I will literally never roster this guy until he breaks out of his slump. And then once he hits 3 home runs in a game, then the next guy, now he's out of the slump. No, like you didn't benefit from it. He just like that's why those types of things. You look at the same data and can think the complete opposite things.
I had that conversation with RBX when he was a guest on my show. He was like, yeah, I can't remember what he said exactly, but he said something along the lines of, he waits for a player to prove it before he will play them. Like when a player's in a slump, he's going to wait until they break out of to play them. And I was like, yeah, I kind of do the opposite. I try to I don't do the opposite, but I don't wait for a player because I want to capture it when they do break out of it too. So I don't know. It's definitely yeah, you just gotta play by the numbers. I guess ultimately is you don't know when it's going to happen, but the numbers can kind of tell you how likely it is that it's going to happen this game. So
and typically you get less ownership on them.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I think I end up sometimes being over on players that are in a slump because I know that the ownership comes down so much.
I have not played playoff NBA, but all I've learned from Twitter the past couple of days is just plug in Desmond Bain and you win.
Desmond Bain and who was it for the Bucks? Grayson Allen.
Oh yeah,
I haven't been playing either. Yeah,
right. Because I keep on seeing it's like, oh, Desmond Bain is unsustainable. She's shooting like 70-80%. And it's like, and now he's even more owned. And then he could just continue, and then he scores 34 points. Or and it's like, okay, now he's going to be even more owned. And then he just continues. It doesn't matter. It's like John Morant's going to have a snowflake and Desmond Bain's going to have 58 fantasy points.
Right. Yep, and apparently that's just going to keep going on
Right,
because
he's hot. He's hot.
all of the sharp players are tilting on Twitter.
Right.
Like these players are so overowned and they're just going to keep going off. So
Yeah.
feel for him. I haven't been playing much NBA DFS either. Just at this point, there's not enough games, and I'm more invested in MLB, so hasn't been a big thing for me.
Right. And you to close it out, you've had you had that Stunner and Gene B. Kim
Jamie.
on High
Yep.
Stakes. Two people I've not heard on shows before.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fun having new voices to talk about. And Gene, of course, is a professor, so his voice is out there to his students, but they don't record. So it was good to hear from both of those guys. I enjoyed having those conversations. That's done, of course, being a longtime friend of Alex Baker, which I learned this fall when Alex brought it up on a show, and everyone was like, "Wait, what?" Well, I know the name, but I didn't know that you guys were like friends. So
Right.
yeah,
It's interesting hearing people's approaches and everything. And you guys very similar questions. And I mean, the problem with the voices in the industry, like getting new voices in the industry, it's like it's one of those prove it type of things. Of like I'm asking people that like I've seen like do it like I'm not
right.
just approaching random people or stuff like that. It's like do you even know how to do you have a microphone? Do you have
Yeah,
like stuff like that where it's like it's so much easier. It's like, oh, I see these guys on shows. I'll ask this guy. I'll ask that. And I try to get people like that aren't off. I mean, I mean, like I think I was the first one to have like Peter Viles, Hubro
yep.
on. Like, I mean, dude, if you have any suggestions, tweet me at Blender HD. And tag that person also and say I'd love to see you on whatever
Oh,
show.
suggests for guests. Yeah.
Right, it's like
I, mean,
suggestions
I,
for
I never heard
guests.
from Zaramek before. A lot of your guests, I feel like, are people that I had never seen on shows. You were the first show that I had ever done, other than I guess one quick interview with Osimo after the Millie. But yeah, it seems like you do a pretty good job of finding people that aren't doing a ton of shows.
Right. And then so once I see them do another show, then it's be like, oh, okay, I could ask them, right? Right.
Right.
Like I feel like if I wanted RBX88, I could DM him. If I wanted like some of the guys that you had, but also I don't want to have similar discussions with what you just had. So it's like
Yeah.
I don't want to be the guy that's like, oh, he was on that show and now he's on doing the rounds type
Right.
of thing. It's like, well, I just listened to this, so like,
A lot of my early shows, I would have guests that you had on before, because same kind of thing. Like it's easier to ask people that have done shows before. But then I would listen to your show and then be like, can we expound on this conversation that you had with Blender? Was a big part of my story, or the Lowell show. Like a lot of the same people have been on your show and then Lowell's, and then yeah, I guess I re-listened to your interviews with those people, and then I'm like, okay, you said this on Blender's podcast. Now can we expound on that? So
right.
that's I guess
Right, I know.
that's the one.
I listen to them all. Right, but then you would get someone if you're getting like people. I'm like, okay, that at some point down the line or something like they're available for because I've taught there are tons. There's a handful of DFS players that I do talk to, or at least in chats with or whatever, that don't want to do that I've said come on, and they go I don't want to be on a show. Okay,
Yeah.
right. So like so until and it's not like they don't want to be on my show. It's they don't want to be on any. Like it's not like I'm asking someone that's like, oh well, you did this interview there and you were on the like. No, it's just someone that like everyone knows the person or they see them on Twitter, right? Right. I follow plenty of people and I've asked people. It's like, yeah, come on. It's like I don't want to. Yeah.
I get it.
Or
For
I
this
don't have
one,
a or they're like one person like I don't have a webcam. I don't have a
I've
mic.
talked
Like
to the same person.
right. Like
Yeah.
I could call you on the phone. It like I didn't mind it, but it's like I could call you on the phone. It's like phone qualities, but like if you're not willing to come, I mean, just and it's not important that I'm going to buy a webcam or something like that. So it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
But if you have any suggestions, you could tweet me at BlenderHD or email me Jordan at theoryofdfs.com and Neil's at playerqdfs. And also I saw you're in you're in one of the discords that I mean you recently
Yeah.
joined to see the
I assumed that you put in a good word for me. You said
no I
come
didn't
join
I
that.
didn't
Oh,
I
really?
didn't know you showed
Oh,
up and I'm
funny.
like
'Cause you and I had just talked about the Discord like a day before it happened. So I was like, okay, Blender
no I
must have
didn't say
told me
any
ahead.
no
That's funny. Okay.
right so once I saw player Q in there I'm like oh Neil got in okay And then and now you see the Discord. It's like you ain't learning anything in there.
Well, that's, other than obviously the cash game lineups, I appreciate that they share the group
Oh yeah,
cash
the
game lineup
collusion
every day.
chat. Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah, yeah. And the
Of
collusion,
course, we're joking. Like I don't think
yeah,
I don't think anyone in that Discord even plays cash games.
really, I haven't.
I mean, truthfully, I don't think
Since I
anyone.
don't play cash games, I have no idea if they do.
Right. No, but I know. I think anytime anyone. I maybe there's one or two. I don't want to mention who's in the chat. It's the secret. It's not the secret chat, but also Alex is in there, even though he doesn't
I've
participate.
heard, I've seen mention of Alex. He has
He's
not
he's on the
participated.
member list. He's on the member list, even though I've not yet see him ever actually type anything in there.
Yeah.
But for anyone that's listening, going, oh my god, they have a secret chat. It's like, dude, this is it's basically all sharp players tilted over shit. That's all. That's pretty much what the whole chat.
Yep.
The whole chat is essentially, holy shit, 32% on golfer just got an eagle. The donkeys win. You know that's literally like
That's exactly what it is.
that's the whole.
It's basically Jesse's tilt chat, but with a
Yes.
bigger group.
He has another Discord. He has like 700 Discords or something,
Yeah.
right? But the fact that you mentioned it's pretty much Jesse saying, I can't believe peak price DeRozan, the donkeys get there type. There's no strategy discussion, right? It's pretty much all that,
I was meaning it was like Jesse's. He created another Discord called the Tilt House,
right?
which is basically the same kind of thing.
Right. He makes the rounds when he tilts.
Yeah, yeah.
He'll post on Twitter. He'll post in the Discord, whatever. He has to let people know that everyone that overpaid for that guy at too high ownership just got bailed out.
Yep.
Right. Okay. So yep. Player Q DFS on Twitter for Neil, at Blender HD for me, and the Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports. You could always pick it up. 15-hour audio DFS masterclass at theoryofdfs.com.